Hello and welcome to this analysis of the poem The Soldier by Rupert Brooke. This is part of the GCSE Poetry Anthology. The Soldier is one of 5 war poems we're going to be studying. Pictures of those are on the screen at the moment. As normal, you're assessed for 3 things. Number 1, an understanding of what the poem is about. 2, the language form and structure. And number 3, the context, that is the history of the poem and indeed knowledge about the poet himself. Rupert Brooke was inspired by the propaganda around at the time, this being the First World War. He would have seen the posters on the screen at the moment before he went to fight. They made him feel pride for fighting for his country and patriotic as he wanted to serve his country and give back maybe something that England gave to him. Notice on the screen the reference to how beautiful England is. Some facts then about Rupert Brooke himself. Rupert Brooke was an English poet known for his idealistic war sonnets written during the First World War, especially the poem The Soldier. Idealistic means he looked on the brighter side. He was expecting war to be wonderful, an adventure. Many people who went to fight would have thought the same. Rupert Brooke caught the optimism of the opening months of the war with his wartime poems, published after his death, which expressed an idealism about the war that contrasts strongly with the poetry published later in the conflict. Poems such as Dolst Cormes by Wilfred Owen are examples of perhaps the other side of war. Rupert Brooke was one of the millions who signed up to fight. He was 28 when he signed up and was idealistic as he was taken in by the propaganda issued by the government and couldn't wait to fight for his country. Here we go then, the reading of the poem itself.
If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. There shall be in that rich earth a richer dust concealed, a dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England's, breathing English air, washed by the rivers, blessed by sons of home. And think this heart, all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less gives somewhere back the thoughts by England given, her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her day, and laughter learnt of friends, and gentleness in hearts at peace under an English heaven.
Unfortunately, Rupert Brooke himself never actually made it to war.
One of the most famous victims of the war was the poet Rupert Brooke. He'd written a poem about the glory of war, and this was a dumb thing to do since he'd never seen the horror of it, but the people back in Britain wanted to believe it. If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. Rupert used to live in Grantchester Vicarage near Cambridge, and he wrote another famous poem about that. The poem is called The Old Vicarage, Grantchester. No prizes for guessing why. He was sent off to fight in Gallipoli in Turkey, but he never made it. In April 1915, he was bitten on the lip by an insect and died of blood poisoning. It must have been a dirty insect that forgot to clean its biting teeth. This was probably not the glorious end Rupert imagined. The corner of a foreign field that is forever England is an olive grove on the Greek island of Skyros, by the way.
Now we know how he died, it might make us look at the poem in a different way. This is not somebody who experienced war, this is somebody who was travelling to war and what he hoped he'd find when he got there. Before we go on to the basics of the poem, let's have a look at the whole thing and begin analysing what we might say. The title itself is The Soldier, which is definitive, as if this particular soldier has some kind of importance, so it suggests importance. If I should die, think only this of me is how it begins. It is giving a command. or an imperative. He is commanding us to think something of him when he dies. He wants his death to be important, and he's writing, if you like, back to his relatives. As we scan down, we can see it has 2 stanzas, and there are certain things that seem to be happening in those 2 stanzas. So if we look at stanza 1, we'll find there are lots of links to nature or natural beauty. We can find those by highlighting. If we look through at the references to nature, you'll find the word field, you'll find rich earth, you'll see a reference to flowers, you'll see a reference to air, suns, and washed by rivers. All of these emphasise natural beauty. Now we know the message of the poem is idealistic. It is wanting us to imagine this war as being a beautiful place where heroes are made. We know that the war itself is World War I, and we know that Rupert Brooke himself died. Key information there to link to our quotes. From there we begin looking closely at the language being used. Some corner of a foreign field. He knows he's travelling abroad. The F in foreign and the F in field gives us alliteration to talk about. And the F sounds quite quiet. So perhaps this is a reference to almost a sombre mood, a kind of quiet or peaceful mood. Foreign field. There is forever, the F sound reappearing there, forever England. As if reminding us that England are going to win. We're going to be victorious. Inevitably, we will win this fight, is what Rupert might be telling us. There shall be in that rich earth, implying then that even if we die, that makes the earth richer or wealthier, as if we're dying for a cause. Again, being patriotic, the cause being our country. A richer dust. Now, rich dust is an oxymoron, 2 opposites next to each other. We know that rich reminds us of wealth, but we also know that dust reminds us of death or nothingness. If the dust has become rich, it implies we as human beings become wealthier by dying for this cause, as if it's honourable to die for your country. A dust whom England bore. Well, this is the 2nd time that England's been mentioned, so let's see how often that actually comes up. We've got England here and England there. We notice English is being mentioned here and here. And as we look down the poem, you'll notice it happens again and again, emphasising the patriotic nature of the poem itself. It then uses a tricolon. Bore, shaped, made aware. A dust whom England bore, shaped, and made aware. A tricolon is a magic 3 or rule of 3 where each bit builds on the next. So England bore, as if England gave birth to us. It shaped us. It made us. And made us aware. It made us human. It made us conscious. In other words, we are made by the country we live in, and gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, as if England made us free. A body of England's breathing English air. Now it mentions her flowers and then a body of England. It's as if it's being personified. The country is being personified as a mother. Somebody who's looking after us and caring for us. It then emphasises this as if we're breathing English air, washed by rivers. This almost sounds religious, as if we're being purified, like being baptised, as if our innocence and our sins are being almost washed away. It's right to go and fight for your country. This will forgive any errors you made in the past. It then mentions sons of home. Well, sons is either a remembrance or a reminder, of the beauty of England, an English countryside. but also sons as in we are sons of home, sons of our country. Sons of our country. Now we end that first stanza, it leaves us to think about our homeland before moving on to the next. And it starts with and, a connective. We've paused, we've thought about our country, and now it's what should we do with those thoughts? And think, this heart, all evil shed away. By fighting, we're getting rid of evil, as if we're fighting against Satan and so for God. It's not just England you're fighting for God. A pulse in the eternal mind. Well, eternal means living forever. We will live forever if we fight for our country. Give somewhere back the thoughts of England given, as if we're giving back to the country that made us. We are able to give back to our country. Her sights and sounds, so exaggerates, making us think not only about the nature in stanza 1, but the sounds of our country, the dreams we have of our country, as if the whole country is pure and almost ideal to live in. Happy as her day, and laughter learnt of friends. Again, alliteration being used at the end there. A soft sound, laughter learnt of friends. It sounds peaceful or tranquil. And gentleness, and hearts at peace. Hearts being mentioned twice in this stanza, reminding us that it's the right thing to do to go and fight. At peace under an English heaven. So although this soldier might die, it is a case of the heaven he will go to is an English one. We are fighting for God. And so we will go to a place we feel the most happy. And heaven that reminds us of home, the country that's described in stanza 1. The tone here is calm, peaceful, and perhaps purifying. Okay. The basics of the poem. Who's speaking? An English soldier travelling to a war zone. What's it about? The speaker informs his audience what to think should he die. He tells them only to consider that a portion of some foreign field will be forever England as a result of his death. The soldier, who was raised and nurtured by his country, brought up by his country, England, will be buried in the earth. After he dies, the soldier will go to a peaceful English heaven, where he will re-experience all his English memories. Why was it written? Its message is then one of patriotism. It is a reassuring poem, and perhaps rather idealistic. It only tells us one side of what war was really like. On the next screen, you'll see 3 quotes then, some of the key quotes in the poem itself. The first one, if I should die, think only this of me. Round the outside will appear some things you might want to say about it. Quote number 2, a body of England's blessed by sons of home. And quote number 3, in hearts at peace under an English heaven. Okay, we've recapped then the knowledge of the poem, we've looked at the language choices. Now, how would we actually write that in an answer? Well, in my case, I tend to follow these 9 steps. Each one of them represents part of what you're being assessed for. Here are the 9 in full. And now what I'm going to do is use these steps to show you actually how to write a response. I'm going to do the first 2 paragraphs. I'm going to start with the introduction and then go straight into the beginning of the poem. A full answer would cover the middle and end as well. The question I'm going to be answering is, how does the poem The Soldier by Rupert Brooke present the theme of war? So the question itself, that is the part that I'm going to focus on, the fact that it's the theme of war. Notice I've listed down 1 to 9 down the side, and I've already colour-coded the most important steps I need to follow, number 1, 4, 5, 6 and 9. I start with overall because the examiner wants to see an overview of the poem, but this would be no means a very long answer. I would just give a quite short introduction just to address the main features of the poem. I would start then with Brooke. Overall, Brooke challenges us with a poem that explores the brighter side of war. That's how it focuses on war. I've mentioned the wording of the question. That's my introduction done. I now then look at the beginning of the poem itself. I look at the language choices and think, okay, what's happening at the start? I start then with from the outset, comma, and then I think, okay, number 1 is talking about, well, what is the whole beginning of the poem about? So from the outset, Brooke gives us a picture of the natural So step 1, say what's happening at the start of the poem. From there we then go into step 2. Why would he do this? Well, Brooke was inspired by propaganda. Around at the time, around in 1914, and wanted to fight. Step 3 is where I look at individual words and I look for patterns at the beginning. We know the word England comes up a lot, but that's through the whole poem. So let's perhaps focus on the nature words in particular. He says, field, rich earth, and I use 3 to show that there's enough there to go on, enough evidence for me to say something about. So I've got field, rich earth and flowers, which suggest, it's important I use lots of quotes in my response. In this case I'm just going to say 1 sentence about them. He says field, rich earth and flowers, which suggest the beauty of home and how wonderful it is. Step 4 now asks me to choose 1 quote. I need to think quite carefully which one would get me the best grade. So I'm going to go for the quote, "A dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware." The double dash there is where the next line would start, and then it goes gave once, and that's the beginning of the next line. I choose 2 lines, so it lets me talk about the enjambment after the word aware. That gives me a chance then to go much higher than just a simple pass. And then I say why I chose that quote. I'm going to use that with the sentence phrase is important as. It reminds us, the reader, that England made us. Now I need to focus on an individual word, a particular word from the poem that I think is particularly important. I'm going to go for the word aware. Implies that we are only conscious because of our homeland. We owe everything to England. So I've now analysed, and now to look at the tone. The tone here is peaceful, to remind us how tranquil England is. Okay, I then move on to the enjambment. Then I get the marks for structure. The enjambment, there's no E in enjambment. The enjambment here makes us pause. Notice the word us appearing another link to the reader. The enjambment here makes us pause and think about how many benefits there are to serving our country. We owe England a lot, and that's what Brooke wants us to remember. My last sentence then, step 9, is where I say clearly what the reader is supposed to think, or what I'm supposed to think after reading this particular quote. I am challenged to realise how wonderful my country is and feel, well, idealistic or patriotic. That would then complete the response. That is an introduction and my first paragraph written. I would start the next paragraph with as the poem develops. And I'd look at the next section of the poem before looking at the last line of the poem as part of my conclusion. Thank you very much then for listening. That was the analysis of the poem The Soldier by Rupert Brooke.